Bonjour les étudiants. Euh, je vous parle comme promis de l'antisémitisme en France vu à travers l'affaire Dreyfus. L'affaire Dreyfus a été un conflit social et politique de la fin du XIXe siècle autour de l'accusation de trahison faite au capitaine Alfred Dreyfus, qui a été finalement innocenté après de longues années. I will translate. Here we see a picture of Alfred Dreyfus. You see him in a military uniform. He was, by all accounts, very faithful in his duties after he was declared innocent. But the discussion of his possible guilt and involvement in an espionage scandal is what causes him at the end of the 19th century to be part of a larger conversation in France of great importance to the culture and its evolution of its understanding of what it means to be French. Le scandale, pendant 12 ans, de 1894 jusqu'au 1906, divise la société française profondément et durablement en deux camps opposés. Les Dreyfusards, convaincus de l'innocence de Dreyfus, et les anti-Dreyfusards, partisans de sa culpabilité. Ici, nous voyons un journal qui a une illustration justement du procès de cet homme militaire lors de son accusation. So, for 12 years, the scandal divided French society. And quite frankly, it's one of the scandals that reminds me of if you ask your average American who Hillary Clinton is, who Robert Mueller is, who Donald Trump is, you will find this kind of a division. It truly reminds me of our current times. And so French society was profoundly divided into two opposing camps. The Dreyfusards, who were the pro-Dreyfus groups of people who felt that he had just been framed. And les anti-Dreyfusards, who were absolutely sure he was a spy and a traitor. Dreyfus a été accusé d'espionnage. Il est condamné à la dégradation et à la déportation en 1894. Voici ce qu'on dit qu'il a fait. Il est prétendu d'avoir passé des documents secrets aux Allemands. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'évidence de suggérer qu'il a fait, mais il est juif. Le tribunal a été visiblement préjugé contre lui pour sa foi et son ethnie. Pour eux, comme pour beaucoup de Français, surtout pendant cette période, malgré sa commission d'officier militaire, il semblait soupçonneux d'office à force d'être juif. Comment pourrait-il être réellement français, les anti-Dreyfusards se demandaient. I will translate word for word. Dreyfus had been accused of spying. He is condemned to degradation. Is like, imagine a dishonorable discharge in public. Like, it's not like you get a letter. It's like you'll see I have an illustration of it. They basically rip off your epaulettes and, you know, take away your weapon and smash it. It's super degrading, literally. Et la déportation, they deport him. Like they deport him to a prison colony on Devil's Island. No joke. In 1894. And here's what they claim he did, that he passed along secret documents to the Germans, who were the adversaries even then of the French. And there really isn't that much evidence to suggest that he did it at the time that they do all these punishment to him. But he is Jewish. The court is obviously, visibly prejudiced against him for his faith and his ethnicity. For them, as for many French people, especially, but sadly not exclusively during this period, even though he's a commissioned military officer in the French army, he seemed suspicious. D'office means automatically, because he is Jewish. Nothing but the fact that he's Jewish is enough to make him suspicious. And if you think about in our time, how some people might feel about a devout Muslim member of the military in our country, if there was ever a crime committed in a whole region that would somehow involve the military, there would surely be some people that would automatically think it was a Muslim guy. I think that's fair to say. In fact, I know it's fair to say because I had a student right after September 11th who was in my class a couple of years after September 11th in New York, and he was a Pakistani American. His family was so proud when he joined the military, and he was going to college on the GI Bill when I was teaching him, and I asked the students to write a personal essay about something that defines them, and he wrote about the time that on September 12th, 2001, he was in a military uniform with military orders and military ID, and he was strip searched at Kennedy Airport, and he wrote about what it meant to be an American that day. I have rarely read anything so powerful as a personal testimony about this kind of a conflict. And here is basically what happens to Alfred Dreyfus. He's an officer. He has every reason to be trusted as much as any officer, except he's Jewish. Comment pourrait-il réellement être réellement français? Here's what they're saying. How could he really be French? Like my Muslim student, the anti-Dreyfusards wondered. Pendant le procès, le tribunal et les officiers militaires ont violé eux-mêmes les lois de la République qui protègent les accusés d'un crime. Ils ne semblaient pas s'intéresser à la vérité. Ils ne voulaient que trouver coupable un accusé juif d'Alsace, car les rumeurs antisémites de l'époque prétendaient que tous les juifs, surtout dans la région d'Alsace, récemment annexée par la France sur la frontière allemande, étaient toujours loyaux aux Allemands. Malgré la division légale entre l'Église et l'État, plusieurs Français ne croyaient pas qu'une personne non catholique pourrait être fidèle à la France. Translating. During the trial, the court and military officers broke the law themselves that protect people accused of crimes in France. And they didn't seem interested in the truth. They only wanted to find an Alsatian Jew who was accused of a crime guilty, because anti-Semitic rumors from the period claimed that all Jews, especially in Alsace, which had recently been annexed by France, on the German border were always loyal to Germany. I'm sure that the irony of that prejudice is not lost on you, given what happens a few years later in Europe. But despite the official division between church and state in France, that's been even stronger there. They don't have "In God We Trust" on their money, for instance. Many French people did not believe that a non-Catholic person could be loyal to France. Comme partout en Europe, la France avait une longue histoire d'antisémitisme. À plusieurs reprises pendant le Moyen Âge, les Juifs ont été expulsés de la France, réinvités à établir des communautés en France dès que les nobles avaient besoin de financer des guerres, et puis réexpulsés dès que les paysans se révoltaient contre la classe noble à cause des impôts engendrés par les dettes des nobles auprès des banquiers juifs. Let me translate. First of all, though, let me talk to you about what this picture is. This is a picture from, I believe, the 12th century of the King of France kicking the Jews out. This was something that he documented as a way to prove he was a good Christian. Yeah, good Christian. And so what I've said here is, just as it is throughout Europe, France had a long history of anti-Semitism by the time we get to the Dreyfus Affair. And here is the cycle. This is the cycle of anti-Semitism throughout medieval Europe, but not exclusively in France. The Jews were expelled from France until because the Catholics were not allowed to lend money with interest, and hence it was hard to get a loan if you were a noble who wanted to have a war with somebody, or I don't know, just improve your castle. You might want to seek out Jews who were allowed within their customs to lend money to finance your various exploits. The problem with that, though, is that you were probably venturing your capital if you were the noble, saying, if I can just win over this other land, I'll become super rich and I'll pay back the Jews. Well, but let's say you lose the war. Let's say you lose the conflict. There are a million mini battles and mini wars in the Middle Ages. And let's say you lost things. Well, how are you going to pay back things? Well, then you'll have to tax the peasants. So you go ahead and you tax the peasants, and the peasants get mad. They say, how can you do this? You're horrible. We won't follow you anymore. And this happened more often than you might think in the Middle Ages, that the peasants came very close to overthrowing the nobles. But the nobles would then say, it's not me, it's those awful Jewish people who are the ones who are the source of your misery. And we know that they killed Christ, right? So let's go kill them. So there would be pogroms, and eventually, to prove their Christianity, as we see the king doing here, who probably owes a lot of money to Jewish bankers, he kicks out the Jews. Why? Because he doesn't have to pay that way. Also, it appeases the peasants. And if the peasants don't perceive the noble class or the royal class as their enemies, the kingdom is stable as long as they have somebody to blame. And who better than somebody who the church tells them is inherently evil. Les Français accusaient souvent les Juifs de sorcellerie et des sacrifices rituels des enfants chrétiens. On disait pendant le Moyen Âge que les Juifs ne restaient juifs que par orgueil, qui croyaient que Christ était le Fils de Dieu, mais ils ne voulaient pas obéir à l'Église par orgueil. Pendant les croisades, les Européens confondaient les musulmans, les Juifs et les païens. Ils étaient tous pour les Français médiévaux liés au diable. Here we see a popular picture of a Jewish-looking devil from the French Middle Ages. And let me translate all of this for you. The French often accuse Jews of witchcraft and ritual sacrifices of Christian children. That's called the blood libel. The blood libel in English. And what that means is they believe, according to the prejudices and really awful lies of the Christians of the Middle Ages, that the Jews totally know that Jesus is the Messiah, but out of pride, they're not going to obey them or the church. So what they do is they will take communion by killing Christian children and drinking the innocent blood of killing Christian children and drinking the innocent blood of Christian children. This appears in multiple stories that circulate, even in high literature. Chaucer writes such a libel against Jews in the Canterbury Tales, among other things. This is a very common misconception. There's so many. If you give me, 4 hours of your time, I can teach you the history of European anti-Semitism during the Middle Ages and the early modern era. You probably don't want all that. And then what I say in the second bullet point, during the Crusades, Europeans confused. They just mixed them all together. Muslims, Jews, and pagans. They were all, according to French medieval people, linked to the devil. And there was no difference as far as they were concerned. In fact, one of the byproducts of the Crusades, which was, I don't honestly believe, intended by the Pope, who most definitely wanted political influence over Jerusalem and wanted to be essentially king of Jerusalem, as did the Belgian king at one point. What he does is he gives a speech talking about how they have to take back the land from the infidels, rather from the Muslims, the Holy Land that would belong to Jesus, of course. What happens is that the peasant community interprets that as go off and kill the Jews. That's a cycle that starts for most of Europe in about 1100 AD, a little before 1100 AD, during the beginning of the Crusade period. And it's one of the worst times for Jews in Europe. These periodic pogroms that take place, among other reasons, out of a fundamental misunderstanding that the Jews and the Christians, the Jews are not the same group of people as the Muslims. They're not the same group of people as the Roman pagans. Remember, most of these people holding pitchforks and torches are completely illiterate. And they don't know anything that they haven't been told by somebody else. And as I said, the nobles find it highly convenient that the peasants want to kill all the Jews because then they don't owe money anymore. Up to a point. That works for them. So this is the evil history of anti-Semitism that the people of the Dreyfusian era, in other words, the 19th century, are inheriting as part of the backdrop of their own understanding of their misconceptions of prejudice. Pendant le 19e siècle et même le 20e siècle, la France n'avait pas encore confronté son antisémitisme. Certains étaient donc facilement convaincus qu'un officier militaire juif ne méritait pas les droits d'un citoyen. During the 19th century and even the 20th century, France had not yet confronted its anti-Semitism, and certain people were thus easily convinced that a Jewish military officer didn't deserve the rights of a citizen. Après le procès, Dreyfus a été dégradé. This picture was illustrated for a popular newspaper at the time. You see that it's not just he got a letter and he said, you're out of the military and we're not going to recommend you. they break his sword in front of him and his company. He's at military academy where he was a graduate. He is being literally degraded. Ensuite, il a été déporté à l'île du Diable en Guyane. Next, he was deported to Devil's Island in Guyana. This is literally where he was sent to live as a prisoner of the state in the colonies. And most people who were sent to Devil's Island would die of malaria or other tropical diseases because remember, there is nothing to protect them and they are not used to the climate. And they are far from home and they are forced to work in hard labor for a variety of things for the colony. And that is literally where they sent Alfred Dreyfus. Pourtant, le frère de Dreyfus, Mathieu Dreyfus, restait convaincu de l'innocence d'Alfred. Il raconte l'état d'esprit de sa famille. Après la dégradation, le vide se fit autour de nous. Il nous semblait que nous n'étions plus des êtres comme les autres, que nous étions comme des retranchés du monde des vivants. Il a organisé des citoyens pour réhabiliter Alfred, des personnes qui appelaient leurs efforts le mouvement Dreyfusard. Mathieu fait ouvrir une nouvelle enquête. So, this is the popular illustration for a newspaper of Alfred Dreyfus's brother Mathieu, who is absolutely convinced that his brother is innocent, and he tells a reporter at the time that after the degradation, meaning like when he had that, they broke his sword at the military academy, le vide se fit autour de nous. That means le vide, like an emptiness, a vacuum, what happened around them. Il nous semblait, meaning the family felt, que nous n'étions plus des êtres comme les autres, that they were not the same as other people, they weren't the same kind of people, que nous étions retranchés du monde des vivants, that we didn't even count fully as living people. And he organizes citizens to rehabilitate Alfred's reputation, reinstate him, give him compensation for his time, and the people, there are enough people, the critical mass of people who are willing to take the side of Alfred Dreyfus, who they saw as being sent up the river by prejudice. And Mathieu also has a new investigation opened up. He has the help of a cop who finds a hot clue, because frankly, no one was looking for a clue. And la nouvelle investigation a trouvé le vrai coupable, Ferdinand Wallenstein-Esterhazy, un ancien espion pour la France. Les anciennes conclusions des investigateurs ont été les produits des préjugés. So, the new investigation that the brother launches finds the real guy who really did it. Dead to rights. They have him pegged. They know he wasn't involved. Alfred Dreyfus, it's this guy that you see pictured here. This is a photograph of the guy when they caught him. Ferdinand Wallenstein-Esterhazy, who was a retired spy, who was basically taking money from the Germans to pass along secrets. And of course, it was very convenient to him to say, yeah, the Jewish guy did it. Cette découverte de la fausseté et le racisme des policiers enrage l'écrivain Émile Zola. Il voit que le scandale n'est pas l'espionnage, mais l'injustice envers un soldat patriotique. This discovery of the falseness and the racism of police officers, sound familiar? I notice that's not a topic that's gone away entirely from the world. Enrages the writer Emile Zola, pictured it right. He sees that the scandal isn't spying, but injustice toward a patriotic soldier. Le journal L'Aurore publie en janvier 1898 sa lettre ouverte au président de la France. Ces remarques font fureur. Ils font réimaginer l'idée de la nationalité en France. So the newspaper L'Aurore, this is literally a picture of it, publishes in January 1898 an open letter on page 1 from this already quite famous and quite popular writer to the president of the Republic. And his remarks are quite the sensation. And they actually make people reimagine the idea of what it means to have French nationality. Voici donc votre devoir. Lisez J'Accuse de Zola, which I'm sending you in an attachment, en considérant surtout les 2 dernières pages. I think that this is about the most meaningful historical look at French culture that might help us think hard about our own lives. I hope you have enjoyed this little presentation, and I hope that you find it useful to notice that the past we forget, we are doomed to repeat. Never again. See you later.